Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, anyways, I said that I was going to post a little bit more boxing videos this week, not only because there's a big boxing fight that's happening this weekend between Jamel Charlo and Brian Castano, but there's also certain fights overall that I have heard of that may get set up. And one of these fights overall that I've heard of have been Devin Haney versus JoJo Diaz. For those of you overall now, I'm sure a certain amount of you, at least for you hardcore boxing fans, or for those of you overall that watch the sport a great amount, like me, you know overall who Devin Haney is at this point. Devin Haney especially has gotten a great amount of push, a certain amount of hype behind him, especially from these LDBC and new media channels, especially when Lomachenko was very prominent at the 135-pound division. Well, Devin Haney, he had a performance against Roy Linares not too long ago. I think that was all the way back in May. I think that was May 29th when it came down to it. I thought he looked very, very impressive against Roy Linares. Now, in my opinion, that wasn't the same Roy Linares that probably had fought a Vasyl Lomachenko or, say, a Luke Campbell. But Roy Linares overall still was in very good condition for that fight, because if he had not been in good condition for that fight, there's no way that he would have been able to survive all 12 rounds of Devin Haney. And I don't think Devin Haney necessarily has a great power, but I do think that he would have had enough power to knock out Roy Linares had Roy Linares not been in that good of conditioning. Now, once again, don't get me wrong, I don't think Roy Linares was the same Roy Linares that fought a Vasyl Lomachenko or fought a Luke Campbell. But do I believe overall that Roy Linares, even at his best, would defeat a Devin Haney? I'm not too sure about that, but it is what it is. What I'll say is this. I'm hearing of an upcoming fight overall that may very well happen between the current 135-pound WBC champion, Mr. Devin Haney, and overall one of the top challengers out there in the lighter weight divisions, Mr. JoJo Diaz. Now, for those of you overall that don't remember JoJo Diaz, I remember when he was on the come up and when he was an undefeated fighter. The first big fight of his career, I believe, came against Gary Russell Jr., and he pretty much got thoroughly outboxed in that fight, at least from what I remember. I mean, at least he was able to survive, and, he showed some grit, he showed some heart, but I do remember Gary Russell Jr. being able to completely, show that he overall was the higher caliber fighter. But overall, if you're able to survive against Gary Russell Jr., or at least become a better fighter from that experience, that's good for you. And JoJo Diaz, I never was really thoroughly impressed with him from when I started watching him. Kind of the same with Devin Haney, actually. When I first started watching Devin Haney, I wasn't really super duper impressed with him either. But what both of these fighters have in common, at least when it comes to me, is that they actually have impressed me a little bit more the longer that I've been watching them. I thought Devin Haney had a very good performance against Roy Linares last time, and JoJo Diaz, he recently, I believe, got a little bit of an upset win over one of the top contenders, Javier Fortuna. Now, Javier Fortuna, in my opinion, he was never really a complete A-grade fighter either. He always had a certain amount of faults. I believe the first loss in his career actually came against Jason Sosa, and then the second loss of his career, I believe, came against Robert Easter. But within the past couple of years, Javier Fortuna has actually put himself out there as being one of the more dangerous contenders. But now I'm hearing overall that there's a possible chance that Devin Haney versus JoJo Diaz, that this fight might happen. And within the past few years, even though I pretty much completely forgot about JoJo Diaz has really reinstated himself as one of the top challengers, as one of the top contenders. And even if we were to talk about this fight, even though I would clearly favor a Devin Haney because I believe that he has just the right type of style to beat someone like a JoJo Diaz, maybe JoJo Diaz can make certain things interesting. Anyways, I want to hear what Dante has to say about it. Let's see overall what he has to say about this fight. Let's get into it, and I'm going to talk about it as well. So let's get into it.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So we got some really, really bad news for old media, but some really, really good news for real boxing fans. And that is JoJo Diaz has agreed to fight Devin Haney next. They have both agreed to fight against each other in November.
The flat spin 360, often imagined, accomplished just this once. The turbocharged Kia K5.
After Devin checked JoJo on Twitter by saying, I didn't even watch JoJo's sorry ass, but it's funny that he's calling out Ryan when he is my mandatory now. And then someone on Twitter actually responded to Devin defending JoJo, and he said, well, JoJo, he called both of you guys out with a laughing emoji. And once again, Devin Haney, he said, yeah, but why would you be calling out someone else's name when you're fighting as a mandatory for my belt, right? Then JoJo, he finally jumps in the conversation, responds to,
I don't think it's really that big of a deal if JoJo Diaz did call out Ryan Garcia. There's such a thing overall as wanting that money shot when it comes down to it. We see the same thing overall with certain other fighters, such as Jamal Charlo wanting Canelo Alvarez. Now, the difference between this overall is that Canelo Alvarez, he really is the number one pound-for-pound fighter, and pretty much everyone wants him because they know not only they may get the opportunity to prove themselves if they beat Canelo Alvarez, but they're also going to get that paycheck. So, they're going to get that lottery ticket. It is what it is. But it's kind of the same thing here. I really don't have a huge problem with certain fighters maybe calling out a Ryan Garcia over a Devin Haney, or at least a JoJo Diaz when it comes down to it, because JoJo Diaz, I don't really consider him an A-class fighter. I think that he's a very decent fighter. But when it comes down to it, I would not necessarily say that he has any definitive A-class wins in his career. Now, to be fair to JoJo Diaz, he has gotten a couple of upset wins recently within the past few years. He ended up getting an upset win over Tevin Farmer in a very decently competitive fight. I remember that fight. I thought JoJo Diaz actually showed up pretty decently well. He certainly wasn't the favorite to win that fight, at least from what I remember. And I doubt that he was the favorite to beat Javier Fortuna, because Javier Fortuna, he was actually in the plans to face Ryan Garcia not too long ago. So I got to give it up for JoJo Diaz. JoJo Diaz has actually kind of came out of the woodwork as of recent. He's really revived himself after that loss that he had a few years back to Gary Russell Jr., and overall, he really has shown that he is a decent caliber fighter. Once again, I'm not sure if I would definitively say that he's an A-grade fighter, but he is a very decent fighter. And let me tell you what, if Devin Haney is able to beat a JoJo Diaz, this would hands down be the best win in his career. I don't think that there would be any debate about that whatsoever. Because the Jorge Linares and the Yuriorkis Gamboa that he fought, they were not the same fighters that they were before. But it is what it is.
Devin, and he says, shut your goofy ass up and let's fight by the end of this year, you pussy. And then Haney, he didn't waste time negotiating a date to make the fight. So he says to JoJo, October? And JoJo, he replies and he says, November, we got a deal. And Devin says, bet. This is good news, guys. This is great news. But at the same time, it's still early and we don't know if JoJo Diaz is pulling a Teofimo Lopez or pulling a Ryan Garcia right now. We don't know yet. But
yes, or a Jamal Charlo or a Gervonta Tank Davis. You notice when it comes to those two fighters, when it comes to Dante, overall he don't seem to mention their names, as much. I find that interesting. But anyway.
I'm going to be optimistic, and I'm going to say that I think he's serious.
I think he's serious as well, but we'll see what happens. Once again, I didn't really have a huge problem with them calling out Ryan Garcia, because Ryan Garcia, he may actually be the most popular 135-pounder right now. Now, in my opinion, out of all the popular 135-pounders, or out of the Fantastic Four or Fantastic Five, whoever you count, I think you have to count the Fantastic Five, because even Vasyl Lomachenko, with his recent loss to Teofimo Lopez, I think that he has sort of revived himself, and it's still very clear that he's one of the top guys there. But the Fantastic Five, of course, in my opinion, would be Vasyl Lomachenko, Teofimo Lopez, Gervonta Tank Davis, Ryan Garcia, and Devin Haney, and that's in no particular order. But when it comes down to it, overall bottom line is this. Ryan Garcia, in my opinion, out of the Fantastic Five, he probably is the weakest link. But I would understand why someone like a JoJo Diaz, who also is Mexican-American, I believe, why maybe he would call out someone like Ryan Garcia, because Ryan Garcia, he may be able to do something for someone's career that maybe a Devin Haney could not, at least at this point in time. Now, for some people, that's not going to make any sense because Devin Haney has the WBC belt. But, let me just make this UFC comparison real quick. I remember back when Conor McGregor was at his peak and when he was basically destroying everybody, he had just recently knocked out Jose Aldo within 13 seconds. And he was at his peak. He was on the rise. And Nate Diaz, he had came back in the UFC scene. And overall, Nate Diaz has been a fan favorite for quite a while. But he especially became a fan favorite after he defeated Conor McGregor. And that really has helped his career so much farther later on down the line. Now every time Nate Diaz is on a pay-per-view card, that pay-per-view always is one of the top most bought and sought after pay-per-views in the whole entire year when it comes down to it. That win that he had over Conor McGregor all the way back in whatever year it was, I think maybe it was 2016 that he won it. That win overall really secured a certain amount of money that Nate Diaz was going to get a little bit later on down the line. And JoJo Diaz, he sees Ryan Garcia, he's undefeated. And on top of that, he is more popular. He is more of a mini golden goose than what a Devin Haney is. I'm not saying that Devin Haney does not attract a certain amount of viewers. Apparently, from what I hear overall, at least from Dante, he sold out a crowd, which is great. But I'm not sure if Devin Haney can do that everywhere. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but we'll see what happens. What I can tell you for sure is this. Ryan Garcia, in my opinion, even though he's not the fighter that Devin Haney is, he is a bigger star than what Devin Haney is. So it is what it is, at least for right now. So we'll see what happens.
Think he wants to fight? I always catch myself being optimistic in situations like this and believing these fighters when they say they're going to do what they said they're going to do, right? I believe Ryan Garcia when he said he wanted the Tank fight.
So my point being overall, when it came to that UFC comparison, at the time Nate Diaz, when he returned, he had beaten a fighter by the name of Michael Johnson. He didn't call out the champion at the time, which I believe was Eddie Alvarez, when he had defeated Rafael dos Anjos. He called out Conor McGregor because he knew Conor McGregor, he was the golden goose. And that's really who everyone is after at the end of the day. So it is what it is.
I believe Teofimo Lopez when he said he wanted the Devin Haney fight. I was wrong on both occasions. Hopefully I'm right when it comes to this situation right here.
Someone you can rely, who's always on your side. That's why there's Nationwide. That's why there's Nationwide. Nationwide is on your side.
Like I was saying, so it's good news that they're talking and they're talking about a date. But it just still blows my mind that it always seems like the champion, especially when the champion is black, is always chasing the mandatory. It made absolutely no sense. For JoJo Diaz, who's fighting for Devin Haney's belt, he's fighting for the #1 spot for an interim belt. Why would he be calling out anybody's name but Devin Haney's?
This would make sense, Dante, or your point would make a little bit more sense if it was a Jaime Munguia situation. And if Jaime Munguia could fight for a belt for Demetrius Andrade, and on top of that, he doesn't really have a lot of greater options. Like, he doesn't have better options than facing a Demetrius Andrade. That point makes sense. I get that because Jaime Munguia, he didn't even mention Demetrius Andrade, I believe, but he was able to mention Gabriel Rosado. Like, that's something overall to where I get your point completely. But I don't necessarily have a huge problem with JoJo Diaz calling out a Ryan Garcia because JoJo Diaz is not necessarily what you would call an A-class fighter. He's also not someone that you would call someone with A-class popularity. And in my opinion, overall, if he probably got a hold of Ryan Garcia, and if he was the first one somehow to defeat Ryan Garcia, that would probably do a great amount of things for his career. That'd actually be a very good fight. I would actually love to see JoJo Diaz versus Ryan Garcia. That'd be a fantastic fight. I'd probably bet on Ryan Garcia to beat JoJo Diaz just because he has, very good power and very good athleticism. He has very good speed. But if JoJo Diaz somehow pulled off the upset, let me say this, it wouldn't be overall, the biggest upset overall that I've seen.
Because, I see some fans, like the guy who responded to Devin Haney, say, oh, well, he called them both out. But it still makes no sense. You're fighting to be the #1 contender for Devin Haney's belt. So why would you call out someone else? Why would you even include Ryan's name? For example, when Kambosos...
Well, right, we can say the same thing overall for some of the people at welterweight. Let's say overall right now that Manny Pacquiao did not have the belt. I'm actually not even sure if Manny Pacquiao has the regular WBA title right now, or if it's... I think he's like a champion in recess. I don't know necessarily what the hell is going on with that. But when I keep hearing overall that they gave it to Yordenis Ugas. Someone let me know on the situation with that. Anyways, when it comes down to the overall, even if Manny Pacquiao didn't have a belt, you're still debatably going to want to fight him because you know how big that fight can be debatably for your career. And if you can possibly beat that person, it may do wonders for your career. So someone may call out a Manny Pacquiao overall instead of calling out, say, someone like a Terrence Crawford. where fighting a Terrence Crawford, of course, is going to do a very big thing for your career. But facing a Terrence Crawford, when it comes down to it overall, first of all, that's probably, well, some would debate at least anyway, that that's a more dangerous fight at this point in time and then in his career because Terrence is really in his prime years. But on top of that, Terrence does not attract the same amount of names as a Manny Pacquiao. So it is what it is.
Was fighting to become the #1 contender for Tio's belt. Notice Kambosos never called out anybody but Tio. He was only focused on Tio because he knew that he was Tio's #1 contender. This is what fighters often do when they really, really want to fight someone for their belt. But what JoJo Diaz did, it implied that he wasn't really that crazy about fighting Devin Haney, but if he had to take it, he would. If enough...
Well, I don't think that he minds the Devin Haney fight. I just think he takes a look at it and says overall that Ryan Garcia is my dream fight. I think overall that's what it meant. But you know.
Pressure is put on him to take it, he'll take it. But regardless if he's pressured to take it or he just desperately wants it, no matter what, you got to give him credit if he takes the fight. Because that would be great.
How come all these Mexican fighters overall and these and also these Caucasian fighters that Dante always talks about when it comes down to it, how come overall it's always they get credit, you know, if they take the fight? But these certain fighters overall of his demographic, like a Gervonta Tank Davis and a Jamal Charlo, oh, we got to give them credit because they called all these fighters. Basically not even mentioning that a lot of the times they sell wolf tickets. But it is what it is. Which, of course, if you don't know what wolf tickets means, which ironically actually is a word that is very much used by the Diaz brothers, the fighter over that I brought up earlier in the video. Basically what that means is that, you know, you talk a lot, but you're not very serious about it. But it is what it is. Anyway.
News for boxing fans. Now, the reason I told you guys that this is bad news for old media is because, once again, old media, they are completely on this MBF mission. Operation Blackout is in full effect. When JoJo Diaz was fighting against Javier Fortuna, Todd Grisham, who works with DAZN, he was the blow-by-blow announcer, he says during the fight, a really marketable fight would be JoJo Diaz versus Ryan Garcia. And it's so crazy because...
Well, that would be a very marketable fight. And to be quite honest with you, Dante, JoJo Diaz versus Ryan Garcia, that fight actually would be probably more marketable than what Devin Haney versus JoJo Diaz would be. You may not like that, but that's the bottom line. Like I've said, Ryan Garcia, he's more popular than Devin Haney is. You can like that, you can not like that. That's that's the facts of the matter. Once again, I don't think Ryan Garcia is as good of a fighter as Devin Haney is. But when it comes down to the overall, he does have a lot of star power. He's had a great amount of push behind him, really as far as I can remember. You know, really as soon as I've seen him, you know, in his first professional fight, whichever fight that was, I can't remember. But this kid has always had a great amount of push behind him. You know, Devin Haney has not had the same push behind him overall as a Ryan Garcia. So once again, it does not really surprise me if someone would want a Ryan Garcia more than what they would want a Devin Haney. You know, like I said, it's somewhat similar like if someone would want a Manny Pacquiao, you know, fight over a Terrence Crawford fight. It's understandable.
This man, he had...
To me, I can't call it a duck overall if you're fighting someone and they can offer you something that maybe that fighter can't, such as money.
It's called the Devin Haney fight a couple weeks ago, where Devin Haney had a full packed house of fans. There was a lot of drama in the fight. There was a lot.
Isn't that interesting that he always brings up how Devin Haney and Gervonta Tank Davis, how they have a full house? And I have no problem with that. That's a great thing. That's a great thing that they attract fans when it comes down to it. But whenever it comes to Canelo Alvarez, he always tries to attack his numbers. Or whenever Canelo Alvarez, whenever he sells house, which is really everywhere. I mean, let's admit, Canelo Alvarez, he could go to, he can go to Honduras, he could go to Nicaragua, he can go to Somalia. Canelo Alvarez is going to sell out wherever the hell he goes. That's just the bottom line. He is worldwide known. He is the most known boxer, at least active. But well, I'm not going to say active boxer. That might be Manny Pacquiao. But Canelo Alvarez overall, either him or Anthony Joshua right now, they're probably the most popular active boxer in the world right now, or they're the main golden goose. And I would have to say Canelo Alvarez is right now.
A lot of punches thrown and landed. Devin Haney even got hurt in the fight because he was so willing to exchange with...
Yes, he was very willing to exchange with Jorge Linares, and, you know, it almost cost him to get knocked out. he needs to be very careful about that a little bit later on. But I think Devin Haney overall is going to be fighting smarter if he faces more elite fighters. I think that's very obvious because he was kind of risking it, against Jorge Linares because I think, he saw Jorge Linares really is not that big of a threat. He really was outboxing him throughout the whole entire fight. And on top of that, overall, he just really wanted to knock him out like Vasily Lomachenko did, But that didn't happen because not only was Jorge Linares in phenomenal condition, but Devin Haney doesn't have the A-grade power that a Lomachenko has.
Jorge Linares, right? So my question is, how is it possible that Todd Grisham, he talks about a possible fight with Diaz and Ryan Garcia when he knows that Diaz is fighting for Devin Haney's belt?
For 600 years, our ninja have brought peace. Wow.
Is because he feels that Devin Haney may just beat this guy that he actually likes. And if somebody on the coincidental list is going to beat one of his guys he likes, there's no way he's going to mention that guy's name on air because he doesn't want to see that fight. You see, they root for these particular fighters, but they have no confidence in their skills.
I have a feeling you do that a lot of the times as well, like with Deontay Wilder and Jamal Charlo, but it is what it is.
At least when going up against fighters on the coincidental list. But fortunately for us, or maybe I should say hopefully for us, JoJo Diaz, he does have confidence in his ability. And he is serious and ain't just capping when it comes to getting in the ring with the champion Devin Haney. It would make no sense for JoJo Diaz to go a different direction. When you have the
No, actually, if you went the Ryan Garcia route, once again, that would make perfect sense. You're just not looking at it logically when it comes down. And like I said, it's not a bad thing if you go for a title shot, but it's understandable if you go for a shot overall that is worth a lot of money, and overall that person has more star power. And there's no debate about overall who has more star power between Ryan Garcia and Devin Haney. There really is no debate about that. When Ryan Garcia even fought Luke Campbell, like that place was sold out. like that was one of the most watched fights recently of the year when it came down to it. Anyway.
Champion that is more determined to make this fight than JoJo himself is. There's a very good chance that we're going to get this fight. And I'll say it right now, even though it's not official, I'll give JoJo Diaz credit if he takes this fight.
I agree. I will give him credit. JoJo Diaz overall, he's a tough little fighter. We'll see what he can do against Devin Haney. I don't personally think that he'll beat Devin Haney, but he will be the toughest challenge of his career, debatably. I'm not going to say 100% that he's going to be the toughest challenge. What I am going to say is this. JoJo Diaz is going to be the best fighter that he's ever fought. Or at least, in peak form.
Because once again, you got a lot of Mexican fighters that are not willing to get in the ring with undefeated black fighters or undefeated black champions at the time.
Yeah, you also have certain black fighters overall that are selling wolf tickets like Jamal Charlo and Gervonta Tank Davis, but you don't really mention that as much. I find that interesting. Anyway, once again, if you're going to do that for the Caucasian and Latino fighters, I have no problem with that, Dante, but then you do the same thing overall with your own demographic. This is why I say overall that these channels, that they have a racial narrative when it comes down to it. Because Gervonta Tank Davis, apparently he was so serious about facing Josh Taylor at that 140-pound division. Have we heard Gervonta Tank Davis call out Josh Taylor or Regis Prograis or Jose Ramirez or any of those boys at the 140-pound division? After that fight with Mario Barrios, have we heard him call out any of those guys? I haven't. Now, if I'm wrong about that, then I'm wrong about that, but I haven't heard him call out any of those guys. Jamal Charlo apparently wants this Canelo Alvarez fight so bad, but apparently he's not willing to fight any of the top contenders to get there. So it is what it is. Anyway.
I mean, outside of JoJo Diaz and David Benavidez, and I gotta say, JoJo's situation is a little bit different than David's because when it comes to JoJo, he's willing to fight one of the most dangerous fighters in his own division. When it comes to David, I give him credit, but going after a dangerous fighter at a smaller weight class is not the same as doing it in the same weight class.
Well, Dante, you shouldn't have a problem with that because apparently the other 168-pounders besides David Benavidez and Canelo Alvarez are nothing but garbage, according to you. And you favor Jamal Charlo in that fight anyway, so I don't even know why that'd be that big of a deal, because really when we talk about these 160 and 168 pounders, in terms of weight and in terms of size, they're really interchangeable. So it is what it is. Anyway.
David's defense, it was Jamal Charlo that called him out first. It was Jamal.
Yes, he was selling wolf tickets, and he got caught on his bluff, and all of a sudden he hasn't talked about David Benavidez ever since. Ain't that strange?
All this start bringing up his name, talking about breaking David's neck. And all David did was just react and respond to it. And he was ready to go. So once again, I give a lot of credit to JoJo Diaz if he's serious. And he ain't capping right now. If he's not pulling the T.O. or Ryan. Hopefully this fight happens because this will be a great matchup. You know, JoJo Diaz is a really good fighter, very accurate puncher. You know, he could box, he could fight on the inside. And Devin Haney could do all of that as well. So
I think JoJo Diaz is a very good inside fighter. I'm not saying that he can't box on the outside a little bit, but JoJo Diaz is usually a type of fighter that tries to, make it rough and tough and mid-range and on the inside. He usually keeps his hands up quite a bit. He'll wait for the counter. I don't think he's going to be able to do that with Devin Haney, because I think Devin Haney overall is going to be trying to box circles around him. And I think it's going to be very tough for JoJo Diaz to catch Devin Haney. I think he's going to catch him here and there. But I don't see JoJo Diaz winning any more than 3 rounds against Devin Haney. But once again, make no mistake about it, this is a very decent matchup. At least overall, this would be certainly a step up from what Devin Haney has usually faced in his career.
this would be a hell of a fight. Hopefully, there are no roadblocks that gets in the way. Let's see how it plays out. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one. All right, now check this out, guys. If you're looking to repair eczema scars, burns, and bruises.
Anyways, that's really about it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. Anyways, we'll see if this matchup comes to fruition. I believe that it very much could. I also wouldn't mind seeing JoJo Diaz versus Ryan Garcia. That also would be a hell of a fight. And to be honest with you, that fight actually would probably do better than what Devin Haney versus JoJo Diaz would do. But that'd be very interesting. Anyways, when it comes down to it, that's really about it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.